Once again, Andor finds itself in an interesting position in the Star Wars pantheon. It's not Star Wars-y enough for some fans, while others like that it's not leaning too hard into the franchise it's a part of. Some viewers love the methodical approach Andor takes to building its story, while others think it's too slow. Some love that the show is venturing into darker themes and adult topics, while others want Star Wars to remain an escape from all of that. And all too many assert that there's no middle ground in any of this, and you have to like or dislike Andor in the exact way they do, or you're wrong. Well, I'm here to tell you that there is a middle ground here for most of these disagreements, and often, but not always, that middle ground is exactly where Andor finds itself. Andor is slow and overindulgent at times, but it's also in service of a larger vision. Andor does feel like Star Wars at times, but often struggles to live up to the scale of conflict people expect and explore the themes common to the brand. Star Wars should open itself up to some more adult themes, while others are a bridge too far, a bridge that shouldn't be crossed. And for a show that's built on nuance, all too many of its fans leave no room for nuance in other people's opinions of the show. Regardless, today I'm giving you my opinion on the second season of Andor by going through all of the good and all of the bad that this season delivered.
I mean, I know the good and the bad.
Starting off with the good, Andor excels in presenting its characters and everything contained therein. For the most part, every character is complex, conflicted, smart, and realistic. Characters seem to have their own wills, their own methods, their own objectives, and this makes them feel alive, and not just like they're pieces in a puzzle that are just here to conform to a larger design. They really never find themselves in stupid situations that were contrived just to force the story toward a plot point or conflict. Outside of some lesser Imperials, where their alignment is their nature, no two characters' goals are ever truly aligned, which creates tension and natural conflict the whole way through. And thanks to some top-tier acting and thoughtful dialogue, this makes the characters realistic and makes them one of the best aspects of the show. Now, not every character, mind you, but the vast majority of them. And it also helps make Andor's world building another standout. When it comes to the minutiae of life in the Star Wars galaxy, no major Star Wars project has ever honed in on that aspect of the franchise quite like Andor has, albeit sometimes to its detriment. But mix in the kind of production quality that has been put into Andor, and purely from a quality perspective, Andor is at or near the top of the heap for this franchise. The sets, the props, the costumes, the ships, the effects, the cinematography, the music, it's all among the best we've ever seen in Star Wars. And that quality is undoubtedly due in large part to the show's astronomical budget, which truly is astounding. But as we've seen time and time again, a large budget does not guarantee a high-quality Star Wars project, lest we forget about the Acolyte. So for once, the budget and that expected quality made its way on screen, and that's a point that Andor does deserve praise for. And lastly, Andor benefits from the fact that it leads into Rogue One, which is a good film, and it takes place at a point in the Star Wars timeline that people want to explore more of. Now, maybe fans would rather we be following the stories of other characters at this time than the ones Andor has brought us, but that's more of an issue with the subject matter. But Hatewatcher, how can a well-made show with good characters at a good point in the Star Wars timeline have an issue with its subject matter? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because here's one of those nuanced issues we talked about. And there's no better area to kick off the bad portion of this review than the subject matter, because it'll probably be the most contentious point I make in this video. In any show or movie, storytelling is king, and central to storytelling is the story itself. How you tell the story can spruce things up and take the story to another level. But the beating heart of storytelling is the story. Now, good storytellers can make mundane tales more interesting, and we see some of that in Andor. And on the other side of the coin, bad storytelling can make a good story fall flat. But at the end of the day, a good storyteller can only take a story that fails to resonate with people so far. You can only dress up a cow so much. It's still a cow. And, again, for the nuance inhibited, I'm making an overall point here, not saying Andor is a cow. For an actual example, James Cameron can make Avatar 2 look like the best thing to ever grace the big screen, but a lame story is a lame story no matter how you tell it to us. Now the opposite is also true. Good stories with interesting characters can also be screwed up, royally. Look no further than Kenobi for that. Fans wanted few stories more than seeing Obi-Wan newly in exile and Vader taking his first steps as the Darth during the early days of the Empire's reign. but they still found a way to fuck up that good story idea. And to be clear, I'm not saying Kenobi is better than Andor. It's not. By contrast, Andor's subject matter, its overall story, and the characters it chose to follow are not in the upper echelon of those available for exploration in the Star Wars universe. Over the course of 24 episodes, it finally built towards something a lot closer to the kind of conflicts and themes people want and expect from Star Wars. But you cannot expect a large portion of the fans to get through 20 episodes of subject matter they're not overly interested in before really reaching that point. I like how Andor tells its story. It has some of the best window dressing Star Wars has ever had. But at the end of the day, it's not the kind of story I want to travel to a galaxy far, far away to see. And I think that's one of the big disconnects between people's opinions of Andor, which vary wildly if you haven't noticed. You can tell me about having dinner with your mother-in-law in your best King's English, it's still not a story I care to hear. Now in Chapter 20, when you finally got to the subject of how the evil empire cracked down on your mother-in-law's family as part of them tightening their oppressive grip on the galaxy as a whole, now you've got my attention. But you could have left out the part about the wedding and the dinner and the farm on Space Kansas. People want to argue that you can't appreciate the story starting in Chapter 20 without the previous 19 chapters, and that's just not true. Some preamble is needed, but there's a limit to it. It's a virtue of good storytellers in being able to introduce a world, its characters, and its circumstances, and get people engaged and invested in a timely manner. So there needs to be more understanding among a certain segment of Andor fans for people who didn't see the kind of Star Wars storytelling they wanted for nearly 80% of this show. And touched on a bit in that whole rant about Andor's subject matter were some of the other problems present in this show. The pacing left a lot to be desired, as Andor once again embraced its tendency to be overindulgent. It all started to come together in Episode 7, and especially so in Episode 8. But we did not need to spend 3 episodes on a space wedding, or on Space Kansas, or on Andor hanging around with these dimwits. Or on Bix's trauma for her to up and leave once her storyline was resolved. There were some good storylines within these early episodes, but this season certainly could have been condensed. And the last point I want to expand on here is why a lot of people feel that Andor lacks that Star Wars feeling. That feeling is not merely elicited by seeing lightsabers and Jedi and Sith and the Force and Stormtroopers and X-Wings. Those things can help, but it's deeper than that. It's a cosmic battle between good and evil. It's the feeling that the story we're watching has palpable, dire consequences for the galaxy at large. It's the hero's journey. And for much of its runtime across these 2 seasons, Andor has been zoomed in on a near microscopic view of the galaxy, and following minor players in the larger story. Cassian, Luthen, Bix, Willman, these are not the major power players we're used to watching in this galaxy, and I get that that's by design. But it's not the roster you want on your fantasy team in this fantasy IP. Now we did eventually reach that point where the battle between good and evil was more overt in episodes 8 and 9 this season, and the reception of those episodes speaks for itself. That's what people wanted from this brand all along. But those grander aspects that people associate with Star Wars were lacking along the way. And in the big picture, that's the good and the bad of Andor as I see it. Andor Season 2 is pretty highly rated, with it snagging an 87% from viewers on Rotten Tomatoes. As for viewership this season, I'm seeing reports that viewership is amazing from the Glazers, and that viewership is garbage from the haters, with both sides drawing these different conclusions from the same data. And I'm not even going to bother digging into it when I see Parrot Analytics, that scam of a viewership company, leading the charge and saying viewership is good and it's raking in hundreds of millions of dollars for Disney and subscriptions. Look into how they measure the impact of a show and you'll see why. All of their metrics are bullshit. And don't forget that the same company created another viewership controversy when it tried to pump up Season 1. From the only hard data I saw without any spin from this season's premiere episodes, viewership was largely in line with that of Season 1, which wasn't stellar. And also remember that most of these metrics only provide measurements of minutes viewed, and Andor is putting out 150 minutes of content a week. Now, from what I've seen in the public discourse about this show, people seem to struggle rating Andor accurately, on both sides of the argument. I think Andor is better than some of the naysayers believe it to be, and it's also not a masterpiece. Sadly, for both sides, in this case, the truth lies in the middle. Some people overvalue certain aspects of the storytelling, like the cinematography, the realism, or the production quality, while undervaluing the underlying story. while others dismiss the show out of hand for its slow burn or its lack of surface-deep elements they associate with Star Wars. To a degree, both are right and both are wrong, but very few seem to meet in the middle when it comes to Andor. And on that note, the show has also birthed a specific segment of die-hard fans that are simply insufferable. Not all Andor fans, but a very adamant segment of them are just rabid. If you didn't like an episode, you're wrong. If you liked an episode, you didn't like it enough. If you think the show is good, you have to think it's great. If you think it's great, you have to think it's amazing. You have to like Andor to their exacting standards, and there's no leeway to be found. Which is actually a pretty fascist way of thinking, so, ironically, they learned nothing from the show they so ardently support. This same segment of the fans, after the scene with Bix's attempted assault, were actually trying to argue that not only is a scene like this acceptable in Star Wars, but they were saying it was necessary. And if you ever find yourself thinking a sexual assault scene is necessary, seek help, okay? So while I'll miss the show in a general sense, I will not miss the discourse around it, nor that rabid segment of Uber glazers. That all being said, Andor is a good show. It's often great, and at times it's brilliant. But it also has shortcomings, it's not amazing, and it's not a masterpiece. At the end of the day, this is just a decent story that was very well told, but that's not what a masterpiece is. As if there wasn't enough nuance to parse out thus far, here's some more. I think the Star Wars media landscape is richer for having Andor in it, but the Star Wars universe isn't much richer for having this story. As a Star Wars fan, I want more mature stories that are a bit more grounded in realism in this universe, and Andor opened that door. Maybe Disney will take a second look at projects that seek to do just that now, after seeing that there is some appetite for it. But given their track record, they'll probably just look at the budget and the viewership and say no, ignoring the fact that they don't need to spend that kind of budget to produce a good, mature story. That all being said, however, Andor didn't do too much to enrich the overall Star Wars story. It just fleshed out some connective tissue between the larger events in the timeline, showing us in detail how the state of the galaxy came to be, at least a portion of it. It didn't explore a new era or introduce major new heroes or villains. It didn't build a new sandcastle, it just made the one we were already playing with a little nicer. But enough from me. What did you think about this season of Andor? How are you rating the series as a whole? Let us know in the comments below, and I guarantee you won't be disappointed in finding wildly different opinions down there. And if you haven't already, like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to HateWatchers for reviews of other current shows and movies. Thank you for turning the middle ground into a battleground with us today, and I'll catch you on the next one.